screen?
I am.
Excellent. So I'm Josh Stella. I am the CEO and co-founder of Fugue. I have also been the CTO. Today, I'm going to do a live simulation of an advanced cloud misconfiguration attack. So what we're going to do is a few slides. If you're like me, you don't like slides very much, and then we're going to jump straight into actually. I'm going to breach my own cloud infrastructure using the same techniques that I learned from a DOJ filing in a real-world cloud breach a couple of years ago. So we're going to go through what hackers really do, at least have done in some cases. All right. Well, I just told you what we're going to do here, so we can skip this. It says Q&A here. I'm not used to doing things on GoToWebinar. If the organizers want to help in any way, I love it when I get interrupted and questions asked, and so however you folks want to handle it. Not sure how to do that in GoToMeeting, but hopefully we can get some Q&A going. And you don't have to wait till the end. If you have a question about something I'm doing, just let me know. Okay, so cloud misconfiguration is by far the #1 risk in terms of what hackers are going to exploit in your cloud environments. I've been in this business for a very long time, and the old attack surface, which still exists, but with much less completeness, was really the network and the operating system and the application. In the cloud, those things do get exploited, but typically only as means to an end. The end being getting access to the control plane APIs of the cloud to do things like steal data out of S3. Today, we're going to steal some data out of S3. And we're not going to do that via traditional kinds of hacks. We're going to do that via cloud misconfiguration hacks, exploiting misconfigured resources. And many of those misconfigurations are not seen as compliance violations. They're not seen as vulnerabilities. So, for example, having S3 list permissions on a running EC2 instance is insanely dangerous. But most people think that's fine. So I'll show you why later it's so dangerous, but it truly is. So they're not seen as vulnerabilities, and that makes them really easy to miss and really hard to find. Many of these misconfigurations aren't things you can catch. We at Fugue do infrastructure as code scanning for misconfigurations, and that's fine and well. You want to do that. It's important to do that. But many of the things that the hackers are exploiting can only be detected in the full context of the running environment and can't be caught in small isolated templates and so on. So you have to be aware, and your security tooling has to be aware of the relationships between these things. What IAM permissions are associated with a compute instance, and what does that compute instance have access to as a public IP address, etc. So this combination means that these things are really common in cloud environments. It says enterprise cloud environments, but it's really all cloud environments at scale. Every single high-profile breach I'm aware of, every cloud breach I've ever researched, is largely due, if not completely due, to getting configuration wrong. All right, so every year we at Fugue do a big survey. This is from last year. We're just finishing up our one from this year, where we get 300 organizations that are operating at scale on the cloud to answer some questions. And these are not, of course, necessarily Fugue customers, or these are just organizations operating at scale on cloud. And so these are some questions we asked last year. 84% of those respondents were concerned they had been hacked and didn't know it. I'm glad the number is that high. It should be everyone should have this concern. A lot of times, breaches never get noticed, and part of the reason for that is very often the data exfiltration is happening not over customer viewable IP address ranges, so you can't even see this stuff on the network. It is common to read in the news about those hacks that later were discovered. I suspect that means there are far more that have never been discovered by the people who were, in fact, hacked. 92% are concerned they're vulnerable to a cloud breach. I mean, the only reason to be in the 8% that aren't is if you're not doing anything in the cloud. I've been living this for over a decade now, purely focused on cloud security. The hackers are clever. They are doing things that evolve over time. Hacker used to mean, it started out, the word meant a clever programmer. Now it means somebody who breaks in and steals stuff and so on. But they're still clever. They're really clever. And I'll show you some of that later. So you should be concerned that you're vulnerable to a cloud breach. All right. 76% said that misconfiguration risk will increase or stay the same. It will either, stay the same or get bigger this year. 76%. It is axiomatically true that misconfiguration risk will increase this year. And the reason for this is every time a feature is added to any cloud provider, and I'm not talking about necessarily one particular customer, one particular company's implementation of cloud. I'm talking about the attack surface of the cloud grows every time features are added. And I'm actually going to exploit a feature that was added years into EC2, this EC2 services lifecycle, to steal from S3. So this is a growing problem, and it will always be a growing problem. This is just the new reality. So Dave Linthicum saying here, I'm seeing a lot of cloud misconfiguration errors in the real world, and it's scaring the hell out of me. Yes, the blast radius of these things is often quite ugly too. All right. Exploit strategy has changed. This is with cloud. It's certainly alongside cloud. It's hard to determine causality, the coincidence here. I suspect there is some causality because of the nature of how cloud works versus data centers. But largely what we've seen is a shift in behavior among hackers, where in kind of the old days, hacking was much more like a Hollywood movie version of hacking. You would target an organization and then try to find ways in. That might be purely technical ways, that might be social engineering or phishing attacks or whatever, but you would target an organization and then find or create vulnerabilities. Examples of this are, the North Korean hack into Sony motion pictures. They did not like a movie that they had made, and they went after Sony, and they were very, very successful. Another one would be Stuxnet. Well, I think it's broadly accepted now that a combination of the NSA and Israelis introduced a malware to uranium centrifuges in the Iranian nuclear program to slow that program down. That still happens. Okay, that kind of targeting and intentional hack does happen. Far more often, though, what we're seeing now is the automation of finding vulnerabilities. So instead of, for example, we know from the social media postings of the Capital One hacker that she didn't go after Capital One. She just kind of woke up one morning and her automation had been running all night looking for vulnerabilities and saw Capital One in the list. Okay, so this automation allows hackers to kind of develop shopping lists, if you will, of organizations that they can go hack without, they can find the vulnerability itself. If a friend of mine, or an associate of mine, rather, who studies pretty much this topic exclusively, told me that the average amount of time that he's seeing between an IP address being on the public internet, or obviously a DNS record, and it being scanned for vulnerabilities is under 7 minutes. So here, John Breeden is saying, they'll discover misconfigured cloud assets within hours of their deployment. As bad as that sounds, it's worse. The reality is worse. It's minutes. And so, as you're thinking about your cloud security strategy, a lot of it has to be preventative, and to be because, as you'll see when I do this hack, it's really easy to get a whole lot of data if you've just done a few things that seem innocent wrong. So you need to be preventative, and you need to try to limit blast radius. And we're going to talk more about that as I go through this hack. Okay. I'm a little off my game because I had all these technical problems getting in, but I think we're ready to go. Let me see. What have I got in my browser window? Okay. Let's go to here. All right, we're going to get a AWS window open, and I'm also going to use the diagramming part of our product, Fugue, to show you what I'm trying to do here as a hacker. Okay, so we make security software here at Fugue, and I'm going to use our diagramming to show you what I'm going to do. Come on, load up. All right, what I want is this guy. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, and this diagramming is just a part of our product. What I'm going to do here is I am a hacker who wants to steal data out of S3. Okay, and we know from DOJ filings and other reports in a pretty detailed way how this particular breach was done. What was done, so just to explain this diagram a little bit, over here on the left is the internet, okay, and then we're going through a gateway, internet gateway, into a VPC network. Here is a EC2 instance of virtual machine running, and that EC2 instance is sitting in this VPC. So the way this real-world breach happened is there was a misconfigured application running on the EC2 instance, and that gave the hacker a foot in the door. Now, very typically when we see this at Fugue, it is forgotten infrastructure. Very often, people will have orphaned resources in the cloud, stuff they've forgotten about, and it accumulates CVEs because it's not being patched, and that gives the hacker a toehold. So you do need to be concerned about that, because it gives hackers a way to get into your account and get that toehold. But really, honestly, nobody is going after typically the contents of an EC2 instance. They're going after S3. They're going after an RDS instance, or particularly an RDS snapshot is a really popular way to steal data, because you only need S3 permissions for that, not RDS permissions. Little known fact. So here again, S3 permissions are dangerous in your running environment. So what I'm going to simulate here is I'm out here on the internet, and I'm going to hack into this EC2 instance. Now, I'm not actually going to hack into the EC2 instance. I'm just going to shell into it. And the reason for that is AWS are, having worked there, I can tell you, are very good at monitoring activity in their networks. And if they were to see me as, for example, trying to use an exploit against a CVE, and they noticed it, they would shut me out, and then our session here would be over. So I'm just going to shell into it, and then I'm going to try to get to data. So my job here, my goal here, right, is to exfiltrate data out of S3. All right. We'll just go to a shell here. I'm going to make this font a little bigger. That looks a little small. All right. So I'm just here. This is my local machine, my laptop, and I'm going to, as I said, I'm just going to SSH in to an EC2 instance because I don't want to get kicked out of AWS while I'm doing this demo or this session. Okay, so I've gotten here to an Amazon Linux 2 AMI-based instance. Now, I purposefully leave this out of maintenance to show you what's going to happen. So this thing's been running, I don't know, for probably 2 years now. And very often we'll see orphaned infrastructure at Fugue that's been around longer than 2 years. Well, here you can see 72 packages are needed updating for security reasons in a year. So that's 2 years. So that's, 3 a month, something like this, out of 152 updates available. Well, if you have anything running in the cloud that you have forgotten about, this is probably true of it, no matter what. And by this, I mean operating systems. We at Fugue choose to use almost purely Lambda functions for our application because we don't have secure operating systems because we don't run operating systems. Amazon does. Okay. So I've gotten into this box, right? I've gotten into, let's see, this guy right here. This where it says legit app instance. I can go in Fugue, I can drill into all the details, and I can see exactly the AMI ID. That is the machine I'm in, okay? So I want to steal data out of S3. Well, it's Amazon Linux. It's perfectly good Linux. I know as an experienced cloud hacker that Amazon Linux comes with the AWS command line tools, which you get to by typing AWS. If you're not used to spending time at a terminal, don't get scared off, okay? I'm going to explain every single command in a lot of detail. All right, so the first thing I'm going to try to do is go take a look at S3, right? Okay, so I got denied access. That's good, right? It's bad for the hacker, but it's good that the maintainers of this system were thoughtful enough to deny that access. All right, so what that means is when you are, and this is where people a lot of times get confused about cloud in terms of where the networks are and what surfaces the hackers are really exploiting, because it's typically not the TCP/IP network. It's typically the identity network. And what I mean by that is this EC2 instance is trying to go talk to S3, right? We got S3 buckets over here. Like maybe I'd want whatever's in this important records bucket. That looks tasty. But I can't even see that. This EC2 instance can't even see that. It can't see S3. It can't even do a listing of S3. And drum I beat, and will continue to, is S3 listing is very dangerous to have running in your production environment. Okay, so why can't this EC2 instance see S3? The reason is it is operating under an IAM instance profile. So when you think about identity and access management in the cloud, you're not really just thinking about the identity of users. The actual components of the cloud use identity to form essentially networks. Can EC2 talk to S3? In this case, no. All right. I need to open my text editor real quick here. Which one is this? And it's could open. I had to switch machines to do this presentation, so I apologize for stuff that would have been set up right in front of you. Okay, I've got some commands here I want to run. So I want to change pace a little bit here. So okay, so as a hacker, I can't see S3. You might think, well, it's game over. No, it's not. I'll show you how we can do some other stuff. But in the news, in for a couple of years now, has often been the oh, I don't have this one set up to. Where's paste? I don't even have this machine set up with a proper terminal. So, okay. So the metadata service. Go away. So the metadata service. The metadata service is a feature of AWS that used properly is excellent. Used improperly is dangerous. And it hits the news a lot. People say, oh, it's because of the metadata service that this hack or that hack happened. No, it's really not. It's because of misuse of it. So what the metadata service is when you have your EC2 instance running here, this is a virtual machine, okay? And a virtual machine runs underneath a hypervisor, right? We all know this. The metadata service is running on the hypervisor, and this special IP address 169.254.169.254 is always the hypervisor, okay? So from any EC2 instance, you call that and you'll get that EC2 instance's hypervisor. And then there's a service running on that where you can see here, I'm looking for latest metadata. Curl is just a command if you're not used to seeing this kind of thing. It's like typing this URL into a web browser's location page or location field. Just here we're doing it at the command line, and then we're gonna print out what we get back. Okay, so I'll hit enter there, and here you can see I can list stuff, related to this instance. Here's IAM. So if I do the same thing and I keep drilling in, I can see, oh, look at this, security credentials. That looks interesting. And here I see a thing called maintenance role. All right, so what I've now done as a hacker is I know what IAM role I'm running under. So if I go back over to my diagram, you see here maintenance role. Well, the hacker did not have access to a nice visualizer. They're having to go do discovery. And this is another point that I really want to drill home. 90% of hacking, at least, is doing discovery. It's learning. And what you want to do is prevent hackers from being able to learn stuff easily. You want to deny them information. Meanwhile, you want yourself and your organization to have as perfect information as possible, okay? So here we've discovered the maintenance role from the EC2 instance. Well, there's some stuff I can do with that. Oh, right, before we get into, come on, computer stuff, updating me. Let's go look inside the security credentials for that maintenance role, okay? Let's paste in this terminal.
Before we get too far deeper into this, we did have a question come in of how would the hacker have gotten access to the EC2?
Yeah, so in this case, they, come on, computer, they would have been scanning any things with public IP addresses, and in this real world hack, it was a misconfigured web application firewall. It was a misconfigured WAF. But if you remember back to that earlier part, this when we were in the slides, right? When we were in the slides, and I said this hack is based on getting a toehold through a CVE and then launching from there, and that's done with automation. So the EC2 instance was noticed by the automated scripting that the hacker was using to it's weird. The hacker was using to just scan the whole internet, okay? And it got noticed because it had a known vulnerability. This is really giving me a hard time. It will not let me paste anything. Let me just open up a terminal here. Okay, so I'm just going to use the terminal in code here instead of the other one. All right, so let's take a look at what happens when I actually dig into those security credentials. All right, so here we're curling, we're getting the metadata service all the way in security credentials for the maintenance role. Like, what's in there? Okay, let's make this bigger. Well, this looks really scary, right? I've got an access key ID. I've got a secret access key and a token. So didn't I just get from the metadata service kind of the veritable keys to the kingdom? No, I didn't. I just got the credentials that aren't letting me see S3, okay? So who cares? Because, and this is what I meant by properly used, the metadata service is actually an awesome feature. It does automated key rotation. And people who try to roll their own key rotation typically end up not doing it well. And that means keys are long-lived, and that's super dangerous too. So with the metadata service, and there's a more secure, the metadata service V2, I think they call it, has some more security built in than V1. But even V1 is fine if you kind of know how to use the tool, okay? A lot of this game of cloud security and cloud breaching is being really up on your identity and access management policies and making sure that they are not overly permissive. And if there's time, I will show you. Close this window. I will show you why you probably have overly permissive, overly privileged IAM policies. Okay, but this one was done the right way. I can't see S3. All right, but I'm a hacker and I know what I'm doing. And so I know I can't talk to S3, but I know that I'm running under a IAM role, and that's where I'm getting my permissions. So I'm going to go searching around, once again, discovery, searching around to see if I can have access to some IAM policies. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm shopping for better permissions. So here I'm using the AWS command line tool again. This time I'm not targeting S3, I'm targeting IAM. And I'm asking for a list of policies, okay? And then I'm going to do a grep, which is a search for things that have a policy name that contains S3. Okay, so now I'm going and interrogating like the world of policies that I might be able to use. All right, well, this S3 read write looks pretty cool for my use case. That's what I want, right? I want to read and write S3. Although honestly, I don't even need write, not at all. I just need read. But actually, even more than read, what I need is list. And I'll come back to why that's true. You're probably sick of me saying that. I'm going to keep saying it because it's extremely important. Okay, so here I'm running another command. Here I'm using the AWS command line to talk to EC2. I'm not talking to IAM. A lot of people think the stuff I'm about to do is in IAM, but it's not. It's in EC2. This is kind of a verbose one. Describe IAM instance profile associations. In EC2, describe commands are what are typically like list commands in other things. But describe means what it says. It means describe this. So here I'm going to get a list of IAM instance profile associations. All right, what is an IAM instance profile association? It is the connecting configuration that makes this EC2 instance have the maintenance role. So that the association is associating the maintenance role to the EC2 instance. Okay, and that's going to have its own identifier. So I just want to list them all. Let's just describe them all. Okay, so here I've got some. Now you'll notice that there's more than one. You can see right here this instance ID, and just to prove to my cunning audience that I am telling the truth, that is the same ID. This is really that compute instance I'm operating on. right here. And you can see that it has maintenance role. Okay, so that makes sense. I've gotten back this description. What I'm doing here as a hacker is I'm trying to get this ID. This is what I want. Okay, so I'm going to copy that guy. I normally have my text editor on my other screen, but I don't have another screen today because, where is it? Oh, actually, that's the wrong ID. I want the association ID, this guy. All right, so we're going to grab that, and we're going to drop it into this big, long command that I'm going to walk through every bit of so you understand it before I run it. Note that so far, all I have done is discovery. I haven't touched anything. I'm just looking around. All right, so this is the first time I'm going to try to actually make a change in this environment, to do anything detectable, in other words. All right, so, or detectable using traditional methods. So we're AWS command line again, and here we're calling EC2. A lot of people think the command I'm about to run is part of IAM permissions. It's not. It's in EC2 permissions. And therefore, this is actually fairly commonly out there in the world, running on EC2 instances in dev stage or prod environments for hackers to go find, and that's really, really dangerous. Fugue will, of course, throw alarms and scream if you have this configuration out there, but I think we're the only ones who've noticed this. So what I want to do here is with EC2, I want to replace the IAM instance profile association. That's a mouthful, but it is replacing that connector between maintenance role and my EC2 instance. So I have to give it the association ID. I want to replace this association ID, and I want to replace it with an IAM instance profile whose name is S3 read write. Okay. Okay, that looks like victory. Here's my same, right? That's the same instance ID. I'm on the same machine. And now it says it has the read-write permissions. Now, I've given this talk before, and inevitably somebody will say to me, well, why in the world would that permission be out there running on an EC2 instance? And here I'm going to show you. It is very easy to say, and AWS says this, and a lot of folks, when I'm giving this talk, will kind of allude to this. Well, you just have to get your IAM permissions right. Okay, that's non-trivial. And actually, the things like the access analyzer don't really help you with knowing if the IAM access analyzer is a feature of AWS. It will tell you if you're over permissioned, in that you're using things that are not needed, but it won't always trigger all of the things that are actually dangerous. In fact, I would argue it doesn't notice most of them. All right, so why do you end up with overly privileged, overly permissive IAM policies? So here I'm creating an IAM policy to talk to EC2. That's when, if you remember, I typed AWS EC2. So these are lists of actions. And one of those actions is the, what was it called? Replace IAM instance profile association, okay? So the way IAM permissions work, allowances work really, is I have to turn on access to the action. All right, so why do we end up with this action that obviously we don't really want able to be run out there? Well, let's see how many write actions there are in the EC2 service. 289. Let's look at list. 124. Read is going to be shorter. 23 tagging. So we're talking about 400 plus of these permissions. And by the way, these often have to perform any reasonable business function. You often need to have a number of these things that may not be obvious to you turned on, and across services in many cases. So what very commonly happens is people get overly permissive. And what they'll do is they'll say, oh, God, I'll just turn on, how bad can list be? How bad can read be? And they'll turn on a lot of that. Or in this case, we've got some write permissions we don't need. But it is not a glass house that I would throw stones from to say, oh, just do IAM right. It's hard. And you probably have, there's one of my favorite reviews of our product on G2. The review, it's a very positive review, but the reviewer starts out that Fugue is going to hurt your feelings because it's going to tell you things that you're doing wrong and that are dangerous. And we all live in that situation. We run Fugue on Fugue, and it tells us when we screw up. Okay, so now I've changed that association. So let's take a look at S3. Right, we want AWS, S3, LS is list. It's the Unix command, Linux command, Starnix command for list, and that's also in the AWS CLI. So let's take a look. Now, but last time, you remember what we got? We got access denied. This time, we're getting an enumeration of our S3 buckets, right? So I'll show you these in the diagram here. Before, when we were in this instance, we couldn't see this stuff over here. But now I get a complete list of it. I just say, give me a list, and here's a list of all the names. So what I'm going to do next, is we know from the DOJ filing, is exactly what the hacker did in this case. It's really great when there's a detailed DOJ filing. So how many commands have I done? I've done maybe a dozen or so commands. Only one of them was not discovery. All the rest are discovery. So you really want to blind hackers if you want to prevent them. Okay. We know that the hacker used an AWS CLI command called S3 sync because it's in the DOJ filing. Sync is not part of the S3 API. It is only a utility feature that is baked into the command line interface. So we know that the hacker in this case was using the AWS command line interface to perform a sync, and she did something like this. I want to sync everything in important records to all your base. All your base is my hacker bucket. Okay, so an S3 bucket, if you're not super familiar with this has files in it. This is an object store, like a giant web server, global web server. So I'm going to suck everything out of important records and synchronize it into all your base. Now, in this case, I've got both of those in my one AWS account. In the real world, this would be traversing to probably another AWS account controlled by the hacker. All right, and I just stole all your data. And in none of it traverse your network boundaries that you can monitor. I just pulled all this data from your S3 bucket and put it in mine. Now, we know in this breach that 700 S3 buckets were breached in this exact way using a sync command. Okay, so let's think about discovery here. First of all, sync itself, when you see here where it's finding all the files. In this case, these are some photos I took in Iceland, not important data. Well, important to me, but not stuff I minded on the internet. It has to use list permissions to get the list of files. So you actually can't use sync if list is turned off. This is a tiny bucket with a handful of photographs in it, but in the real world, these breaches usually happen to very, very large quantities of data in these buckets. These buckets can be absolutely huge. And the hacker stole data from 700 of them. Well, if I can't list, I don't know what files to get, even if I can get, right? And I can't list, I have to know the names of the objects. So by turning list on, you've given them a map to, and what I mean by turning it on is having it out in the production environment in a running instance, okay? That is, I would argue that the principal misconfiguration in this, there are really 3 or 4 total. The worst one is definitely the IAM role assumption. this should just never be allowed for anything running in production under any circumstances. It's just a absolute black hole of risk. But the next worst thing was the S3 list permissions. The misconfigured WAF with the CVE, who cares? Because I mean, you want to prevent that, but that is a minor piece of this hack. Patching our operating systems is important. You should do it. But had I properly configured my IAM, EC2, and S3 resources, it wouldn't have been a problem. Okay, and so that's what I mean about limiting blast radius. Blast radius is defined by what the hacker, I mean, at its outside, right? The limit of blast radius is what the hacker can find. So if they can't see things, they can't take things, generally speaking. So what you want is, anywhere in your infrastructure, you want a limited visibility to the rest of what's going on for the hackers, but you yourself need to have full visibility into the entire environment and track it at all times, so that you don't end up with things like out-of-date machines, or I can't tell you how many times we see, or people will run Fugue, and in about 10 minutes we'll show, you can use this for free, by the way, at a developer scale. We'll show this kind of Google Maps for cloud diagram we do, and somebody will say, what is that network? And in one case, I had somebody at a big enterprise software company say, oh, an intern built that last year, and it had compute instances running in it. Well, there's hackers in that network, right? Because they're sitting there exposed. Okay, I think we're coming out of time here. So any Q&A for me?
Yeah, so why don't we get probably the closest one. If they couldn't use ls to get a listing of resources, could they use sync star.star or something similar to that?
Actually, no, because sync, in order to do the individual get commands that it's going to do, right, it needs the file names. And so sync is just a utility running on the local machine that's using the AWS API behind the scenes. So no, you can't get around it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, the way to not use lists is to store the keys you need, the object names, in some other resource like a database, so that your application isn't having to do lists on S3. It knows what files it needs.
Right. One of the others, not a very specific question, but someone wanted to know your thoughts on the recent Ubiquity breach, given their cloud service provider for their devices.
I haven't read much on that. I don't have. I'm too ignorant of it to have an opinion. But now I will take a look. Oh, is this? Trying to remember which one this is. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I saw it happen. I don't know enough about it to have an opinion. There's all kinds of reasons that could happen. However, if you're not using multi-factor authentication everywhere, just do that. Leaked passwords shouldn't be cause for alarm. Leaked API keys should. So, but leaked passwords, if you have MFA, I mean, you can, the Ubiquity hack was passwords, or that was some of the leaked data. MFA gives you a nice buffer. I mean, doing what I do, my social media accounts, somebody attempts to hack them like daily. And I have multi-factor authentication turned on. So my phone says, hey, somebody's trying to do this, and they don't have my phone, so they can't do it. Now, they could, there are ways, if they really wanted to target me, they could, but it is awfully secure compared to just a password.
Awesome. I'm not seeing any other questions, so that may be it.
Cool. Well, I had fun. Thanks for bearing with me as I worked out my tech issues at the beginning, and I hope you all enjoyed this.
No worries. I know I learned a lot. Thank you very much for taking your time.
You bet. Have a good one.